Ever wonder why you can just grab some medicines off the shelf at a pharmacy, but for others, it's this whole process involving doctors and strict controls? Well, let's get into it, because there's a very specific reason for that. The short answer is a formal system run by the Drug Enforcement Administration, or the DEA. You can think of it as a way to constantly balance how useful a drug is for medicine against the potential risk it poses to public safety. So, to really get this, we've got to look at the framework the government uses to make these big decisions. And it all starts with a simple, standardized test. This whole system is officially called the Controlled Substance Schedules. Basically, it's a rulebook that sorts every single controlled drug in the US based on a really specific set of criteria. And this right here, this is the heart of the whole system. Every substance is put through this three-factor test. First, does it have an accepted medical use? Second, what's its potential for abuse? And third, how likely is it to cause dependence? The answers to these three questions, well, they determine everything. Okay, so now let's see how this test actually plays out. The results sort all of these drugs into 5 distinct categories, or schedules. We're going to walk through them now, from the highest level of control all the way down to the lowest. You know, a great way to understand the whole range is to just look at the two extremes. On one end, you've got Schedule 1. These drugs have no accepted medical use and a really high potential for abuse. Then, all the way on the other side, you have Schedule V. They do have accepted medical uses and the absolute lowest potential for abuse. Everything else is going to fall somewhere in between. So here's the full breakdown. Right at the top, Schedule 1 is for drugs like heroin and LSD, no accepted medical use. Then you have Schedule 2, which is super interesting. It includes drugs like oxycodone and fentanyl, which have legitimate medical uses but also a very high potential for abuse. As we move down, Schedule 3 covers substances with a more moderate risk, like ketamine or Tylenol with codeine. Schedule 4 is where you'll find a lot of common prescriptions, think Xanax or Valium, which have a low abuse potential. And finally, all the way at the bottom, Schedule 5 represents the lowest risk, with things like cough syrups that have just a tiny amount of codeine. Let's just zero in on Schedule I for a moment. The main thing to remember is that on a federal level, these substances are considered to have no valid medical purpose and a high risk of abuse. This makes it the most restrictive category of them all, which creates huge barriers for things like research and access. Now, Schedule 2 is fascinating because this is where you find some of the most powerful prescription drugs we have. These medications are incredibly valuable in medicine, but they also carry a severe risk of dependence. And that's exactly why they come with such incredibly strict rules for prescribing and dispensing them. And this brings us to a category that a lot of people might recognize. Schedule 4 drugs, like common anti-anxiety meds or sleep aids, are seen as having a pretty low potential for abuse compared to the drugs in Schedule 3. You still need a prescription, of course, but the controls just aren't as tight as they are for Schedule 2 or 3 substances. So, we've got the categories down, but what does all of this actually mean in the real world? Why is this system so important, especially for people working in healthcare? This quote from a professional really just hits the nail on the head. If you're a paramedic or a nurse or a doctor, knowing a drug's schedule isn't just random trivia. It's absolutely critical for giving safe and effective care. So ultimately, that schedule number acts like a quick cheat sheet for providers. It immediately helps them guess what the side effects might be, get a sense of the abuse risk, understand the kind of strict paperwork that's required, and, most importantly, keep both the patient and themselves safe. All right, let's zoom out for a second and look at the real purpose of this entire system, because it all comes down to a very, very delicate balance. At its absolute core, the DEA's scheduling system is all about this constant effort to weigh a drug's benefits against its potential for harm. It's a framework designed to make sure necessary medicines are available to the people who need them, while doing everything possible to minimize the damage they could cause. And this leaves us with a really big, important question. Science and our understanding of these substances are always evolving. So how can a system, one that's been in place for decades, adapt? Figuring out how to keep up with new research and changing social norms, all while still protecting public health? Well, that's the critical challenge ahead.